When Jesus teaches on acceptance, when he says, do not resist evil, he says this after saying, you have said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. That is, there's evil and there's good. And everything's got to be equaled out in some way. He says, don't resist evil. But if someone slaps you on one cheek, turn to him the other. If someone asks you to go a mile, go 2 miles. If someone tries to steal your coat, give him your shirt. All these kind of things. Agree with your adversary on the way. It's over and over and over. Jesus is saying, walk in acceptance, not resistance. And resistance is a measure of judgmentalism. It is judging the moment. It's deciding this is a bad moment. This is a good moment. And moving left to right all the time. Bad things happen, we're sad. Good things happen, we're glad. And because of that, we're controlled by every situation. Once we make a judgment about how life is supposed to work, when it doesn't work that way, guess what? You feel ratty because you want life to be better. And after all, that's what this is all about, right? Living life abundantly. But that's not quite what Jesus is trying to teach us here. He's not trying to teach us how to get things good, how to make things better. He's trying to show us how to transcend all of it, to move beyond it. Earlier I talked about how Jesus said that there was I love this story, so I love to tell it again. How there's a farmer who had a field and one day he had all of his servants there and they planted a great crop, and in the night, or rather the next morning, the servants come to him and tell him that in the night his enemies came and they sowed weeds and all kinds of stuff among the wheat. And they said to the master, should we go now and pull up, dig up all the bad stuff so we can have a good field? And the master wisely says, no, if you go now and you try to pull up the bad, you're going to pull up the good with it, because you don't know the difference. That's kind of it, isn't it? Acceptance gives us time to know the difference. It gives us time to see how things will develop, not judge it so quickly. Is this a bad thing? Is this a good thing? We think in terms of, again, we think linear, cause and effect. In John 9, there's a story about where Jesus and his disciples came upon a blind man who had been blind from birth. And his disciples ask a question immediately. They say, who sinned that brought about this blindness? Was it him, the blind man, or his parents? Now they are making an assumption that good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people. And so they assume blindness is a bad thing. They judge that immediately. Blindness is bad. And since it's bad and bad things happen to bad people, then it must be sin that brought this about, the sin of his own or the sin of his parents. And Jesus flips it. He flips it all the way around. He says it's neither. It's not, what he's saying is, they're saying the blindness is the effect of some cause, that cause being someone's sin. Jesus flips it and he says, no, the blindness isn't the effect of some cause. The blindness is the cause for a different kind of effect. That effect being that when I heal him, the glory of God is going to be seen among everyone in this village. In other words, he was blind, born blind, for a purpose. You see, we don't see things correctly. We don't judge well. And when we go around judging consistently over and over and making these judgments in our life, we are putting these boundaries and parameters around our life that in many cases can't even be met. And no wonder we're so anxious. No wonder we're so sad. And no wonder we're having to cope with so much, because we cannot let it be. We can't seem to just let it flow. Jesus says, don't worry about yesterday. Don't worry about tomorrow. Live in the moment. Because each day, he says, has the perfect amount of trouble built into it. The perfect amount of tension, human tension. We, in Christian circles more particularly, we try so hard to have good. And that's great. But it really puts us in a bad position, because we're fighting, trying to get the good, trying to get the positive. We want no negative in our life. Don't bring it up. Don't bring up the negative. Put all the positive affirmations on our mirror and all that kind of stuff, which is fine. Here's the deal. Life is a cycle. It's a circuit. And life requires both positive and negative experience. Requires it. So if you're going to have negative experiences, why not accept them? Flow with them. See what they're there for. They probably have some kind of purpose, especially since we know that everything is working out for our good. When there's another story I'll tell you, it's a beautiful story in the Old Testament, in Genesis. One of the first fathers of Israel, Joseph. Joseph was the brother, was one of the 11th among 12 brothers. What I'm trying to say. And Jacob is his father. And Joseph is kind of an outgoing kind of dude, but he's not very popular with his brothers. So the story goes, his brothers actually throw him into a pit, take a coat that his father had given him, they put blood on it, and take it back to his father and tell his father that somebody killed him. He was killed by some wild animal. When actually they had sold him as a slave to a merchant passing by, going to Egypt. He goes on his way to Egypt. He winds up eventually all kinds of I won't go through the whole thing. Lots of bad things happen to him. Lots of bad things. And he winds up in Egypt. But eventually, he's imprisoned. And you can read it for yourself in Genesis. He's imprisoned, but something miraculous happens, and he winds up being second in command of all of Egypt. Well, a famine comes along, and his family, who all think that he's dead, wind up in front of him needing food. And once he works it out with his brothers, which you can imagine that must have been a tumultuous thing with the family. But once he works it out and forgives his brothers, he says this. He says, what you meant for evil, God meant for good. And we got to pay attention to that statement for a second. Because the what in that statement is the same no matter who did it. The what is being tossed in a pit, sold as a slave, being imprisoned. All of these bad things, that's the what. What you meant for evil, God meant. That means God willed all of that to happen so that he would be in that position to save his family. See, we don't know how things are going to work out in the end, and if we just flow and accept it and move with it, then this river, this flow will take us exactly where we're supposed to be. Acceptance. You don't want to get rid of all the negative. It's kind of like if you go out to your automobile right now and take the battery out. And I want to take the battery and cut out all the negative. Take the negative side of the battery and cut it off. Number one, you won't be able to find where the negative ends and the positive begins. And number two, if you do that, you won't be able to crank your engine because you'll have no power. The people who walk in power are the people who know how to manage the circuit of good and evil, positive and negative. Hi all, I hope you're enjoying the videos. If you are, check us out. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Like our videos, share them out with other people. If they're a blessing to you, bless someone else with them. If you'd like more information about our program, Recover Wholeness, email us at recoverwholeness@gmail.com.